This is The Road Show, and I'm your host, David Warren. Today is Therapy Day with our friend Kim Har, a licensed professional counselor and a licensed marriage and family therapist. Today's topic is, drumroll please, Kim's top 10 reasons couples come to see her for counseling. Welcome back, Kim.
I am so excited to be here. Thank you, David.
Just 10 reasons? Or these are the 10 top reasons?
I would say these are the most common, but it is the top 10 for people that come to see me.
Do you like working with couples versus an individual?
You know, I think they both have their pluses and minuses. I do really enjoy working with couples. That's one of the areas I put a lot of my expertise. But it's also some of the hardest counseling I do. Because when you get more than one person in a counseling room, you've got to always be aware of different emotions, that one is triggering the other. And sometimes I tease and say I feel like a choir director. And I'm telling one section to kind of quiet down a little bit while I want to hear the other. And I want the other one to kind of quiet down a little so I can hear the other section. And it is definitely an art.
And let me add, based on interviewing you many, many times, that you are not allowed to go home and tell your husband or your family members whom you saw that day or what you talked about, which is great.
Everything is confidential. Everything stays in my office, although I always have to tell my clients there are 4 reasons I do have to break confidentiality, and those are the reasons of if they were going to leave my office and go hurt themselves, if they were going to go hurt somebody else, child abuse, or elder abuse, if they disclose that.
Okay, and I just re-listened to our former taping to kind of get in the spirit of what you and I would be doing today with a new therapy session. And you pointed out that you have been licensed for 17 years.
I have. It has been 17 years. The years have flown by. And, I always ask myself, when am I going to retire someday? But I really enjoy what I do. So I think I will always be involved in some way.
All right. Well, before we take a break and then dive into the top 10 reasons couples come to see you, because you're going to be giving tools.
I am. I'm going to give you some of the actual tools I work with couples.
All right. But let's hear a Hardy Har story. Remember, Kim's last name is Har, H-A-A-R.
That's right. There's always something going on at the Har home. I like to think of myself as, in my mind, I am Joanna Gaines from Chip and Joanna Gaines, the Fixer Upper show. Mm-hmm. And I was asking my husband, I don't know, probably about a month ago. It started with a question. And I said, hey, honey, what would you think if we pulled the carpet out of the back bedrooms and the hallway, and if we thought about matching the hardwood floors to the rest of our house? Mm-hmm. And I just meant it as a question. But when you're married to my husband, Andrew Har, questions very quickly turn into projects. And so within 2 weeks, within a few days, he had pulled up the carpet. We had scheduled people to come and do our hardwood floors. Once they replaced our hardwood floors, then we decided we need to paint. So then we had to paint the walls to match, a fresh look for the new floors. And then I had to buy new lamps. And then I had to buy, new rugs to go on the hardwood floors to cover the new floors.
Right.
Then it kind of made its way out into the hallway, and we had to paint the hallway. And finally, we painted our front door of the house. So we kind of start with something really small, and before long, it just morphs into this huge project.
And this is why you can't retire, because these bills are starting to arrive.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Well, we do a lot of it ourselves. And it's kind of funny. I tease my husband. We have a contractor that is a fabulous contractor, and his name is Jesus. But when he calls in, when we're driving in my husband's truck, it will pull up on his little screen, and it always says, Jesus is calling. And so I will tease him, okay, Jesus has got our number. So we're always doing something like that, but we start small, and it tends to snowball.
Well, speaking from a lot of experience here, David Warren talking now, Jesus is a very common name in the Spanish-speaking world.
It is.
I've never heard of an English-speaking person. That's their native language, being called Jesus, except, and Jesus wasn't an English speaker.
That's right.
So it's interesting. That's a cultural thing.
Mm-hmm. And we love Jesus. He can do anything. We've had him replace, bathrooms and cabinets. And so I don't share his number very often with people because I know I'm going to be using him.
That's great. That's great. Well, Kim, just to repeat what today's topic is, your top 10 reasons why couples see you in search of help. Mm-hmm. Tell our listeners the name of your practice and website.
Sure. My practice is called There's Hope Counseling, and I am located at 71st and Yale in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I see not only couples, I see women and men, I see adolescents. I do not see children. That's just not a focus of my practice. My licenses would allow me to, but that's just not my target population.
But it is a specialty. I interviewed a lady named Sissy Goff, and that is her specialty. And
that's what you want. When you're looking for counseling, you really want to go to somebody that has got expertise in the area that you're wanting it in. If someone is wanting marriage counseling, and that's what we're talking about today, you want to be seeking somebody that is good at marriage counseling. Mm-hmm. Because you can have licenses, and your licenses can qualify you to see a lot of different things, but that doesn't mean you're good at everything.
All right. Well, let's take a break and be back and dive in.
Sounds good.
I'm David Warren, here with some exciting news for Oasis listeners. We have a new mobile device app. It's free, easy to download, and lets you enjoy our refreshing music and talk everywhere you go. If you have an Android cell phone, go to the Google Play Store. And if you have an iPhone or iPad, visit the Apple Store and search for Oasis Radio Network. Be an Oasis ambassador and share this news with family and friends around the world.
I came to this place from a dry, thirsty land. I found an oasis of love. Oasis Network.
And we're back. I am David Warren here with our friend. Who wouldn't love this lady? Kim Har, a licensed professional counselor and a licensed marriage and family therapist. At the time of us doing today's program, you currently have no slots available, do you?
I currently have no slots available. I'm not taking any new clients, probably for about 2 to 3 months.
All right, even with all those house repairs.
That's probably why. I'm in my own therapy.
Well, that's because you've been at this a long time and people really enjoy spending time with you. And we're glad that you spend your time with us because it's like we're with you in your office when we're on the radio together, Kim. Okay, I'm David Warren here, and I will be your host on this program, and we're just going to navigate these top 10 reasons why couples go to see Kim in her office. There's Hope Counseling. And as we get started with this topic, I read in today's show notes, Kim, that the average couple waits 6 years before seeking help for marital problems. 6 years.
I know.
That's 6 years too long.
That's a long time to be unhappy. And that doesn't mean they're married 6 great years and then it's counseling. It's when they're beginning to have problems, they wait 6 years and just kind of let that fester or grow or push it to the side. And at the end of 6 years, when they come, a lot of times it's really crisis.
And I would assume, just like any health crisis, if you catch it early, the odds are much greater in surviving as far as a couple.
That's right. That's right. Being proactive is really important. And I think that even, just the changing times, counseling used to be seen as for, people that were mentally ill or there was a stigma with it. And anymore, counseling is really seen as something that's very proactive. Mm-hmm. And, I kind of smile when it used to be people wouldn't want to say, I'm going to therapy. Now, especially after we went through the pandemic, it's very, very common to hear, well, who's your therapist? And it's like people are exchanging therapist names, and it's just a normal part of life.
Right, because, we're 3-part beings, spirit, soul, and body. And I like to think of having a good pastor, a good therapist, and a good trainer in the gym.
Well, I have a good pastor and a good therapist. I'm working on the good trainer in the gym.
Again, you're doing those house projects, and that's a little bit of an exercise you're getting there.
Yes, it is.
So I'm just going to guess, is it the wife that typically talks the husband into going to
It is.
counseling?
You know, women tend to be quicker to want to come to therapy and also quicker to make the phone calls. And I think part of that is because we as women tend to be more relational. When women get together, we can talk about absolutely anything. We meet people, and I always tease my husband when we go somewhere. I'll say, you know, ask me what I know about this person after 5 or 10 minutes. And I did this. I had some friends. I had 2 girlfriends that spent the night the other night from out of town, and we went to the grocery store. And I was in the line at Walmart for just probably, you know, just checking out. And by the time we got through, they were in a different line. And I told them, I think I've got the word therapist written on my forehead because I knew all about the medical issues this woman was having, how her kids were coming to visit her, all of the struggles. And I was only in line for 4 minutes. So I think that women just tend to be more relational and we talk more. We're not as private sometimes as men are. Whereas when a man calls me for marriage counseling, and this is not always, but typically when I get the man or the husband that's doing the calling, I usually know that their issues are going to be a little bit more severe. Their issues are going to be a little bit more of, hey, a typical phone call might be, my wife and I need marriage counseling and we really need to get this fixed now, versus women wouldn't necessarily wait so long.
Well, let's think about these 6 years before a couple decides to go get help in the area of counseling. You know, it's very subjective what the wife is thinking and what the husband is thinking of, well, you know, these are just normal problems. Everybody has these problems. When is it problems that everybody has and problems that really need some counseling?
I don't think that there's just a cookie cutter answer to that because it may be a problem that everybody has, but you've got 2 unique individuals. And so something may affect one partner different than the other. One may think it's a huge problem while the other may think it's really not a big deal. And sometimes when I have couples come in, when I'm doing their first assessment, a lot of times I will ask the question, and I want to preface this by saying I am not a divorce counselor. I am not advocating, telling people they should be getting divorces, but I want to know, and I will ask them on a scale of 0 to 10, if 10 is when you leave my office, you are going to go file divorce, and 0 is there's no chance in my mind, we're going to get divorced. I want to know where they are. And it is very, very common that I will have a wife come in and she may say, I'm at a, 5, 6, or 7. And a husband will look at me with like deer in the headlight, a look on his face. And he'll say, I'm at a 1. I had no clue she was that serious about this. And so I think that it tends to be problems can get minimized. They get swept under the rug. We tell ourselves, well, everybody goes through stuff. And so it erodes. The foundation of our marriage can erode underneath where we're not even seeing it erode.
But wouldn't you say if it's not good for one, it's not good for both because you are operating as one unit?
That's correct. I always tell people if there's an issue, if one of the partners has an issue and something's important to them, the other partner needs to make it important to them and make it an issue. So we're in this together, and we really need to be looking at it as we are going in as a we and as a team. And if you're not happy, I may be thrilled, but if you're not happy, then our marriage is not healthy.
All right. Well, the number one reason why people, or I should say couples, see you, Kim, and well, all of these are really good reasons, but the first is a breakdown in communication. What does that look like?
I think that a lot of times people don't know how to communicate. They don't know how to talk about things that are bothering them. They also don't know how to listen to, from your other partner of the things that are bothering you. We don't know how to communicate because a lot of times in our families of origin, we really tend to pattern our relationships on what we learned. And so many times I will hear somebody say, I had an amazing family and our family never ever fought, or there was never any problems. And usually it means that there was no emotional communication taught. I don't know how to deal with things. And so you may look at me and have a cross-eyed look on your face, and I'm panicking on the inside because I don't know what to do. So the other thing we do is we tend to listen to each other, but I'm listening to respond. I'm not listening to hear. And so communication can be very one-sided. It can be, I'm paying attention to you, but my body language may be distracted. You know, I may be looking down at my phone, or I may be kind of listening to you in between TV commercials. You know, so much is involved with communication with body language that just because I don't say something doesn't mean I'm not communicating.
So would the complaint from either the husband or wife be, he doesn't listen to me, she doesn't listen to me?
Absolutely. I don't, and it's more, they don't listen, but it's more, I don't feel heard. And because one partner can talk to the other, but if I'm not really listening to understand, you know, when you're having a conversation, the goal is to have empathy for the other person, try to put yourself in the other person's shoes, and come at it with curiosity. You know, if you're telling me something, I want to know, help me understand. Can you tell me more? Do you feel understood? And so it's really, just because I think I'm understanding doesn't mean the other person feels understood.
Give us some tools.
Okay, some of the tools are the very, very practical tools. And the first one is we need to make it safe to have two different perspectives. You know, there's a saying that talks about 5 blind men, and they are all touching an elephant in different parts, and they're trying to describe an elephant. One is touching the trunk, one is touching the ear, one is touching the tail, you know, one's touching the underbelly, the leg. And so the one blind man that's touching the tusk is saying, hey, it's sharp and it's pointy and it's curved. And the one that's touching the ear is saying, no, that's not an elephant. I'm touching this, it's kind of pliable and it's big and it's shaped, you know, like a big fan. And the one that's touching the tail is saying, no, that's not an elephant. It's long and it's kind of coarse. And the question is, who's right? They
They're
all
all
are.
right.
Yeah, they all are. And so there's a part of we've got to be able to hold on to that there's more than one perspective. And it's not my perspective is right and yours is wrong. It's just saying we both have different perspectives and they both are very valid.
Give us some practical advice for couples listening today. How should they communicate?
Okay. The first thing with communicating is what we talk about is reflective listening. And reflective listening is I'm just going to reflect back to you what you're telling me. So you may be telling me that you've had a hard day. You may be telling me, you know, lots and lots of details and you're frustrated and upset. And my reflective listening, it's not that I'm just parroting the exact words, but I may be just responding back to you. Like you've gone into details about, you know, somebody that said something and you were upset. And my reflective listening may simply be, you know what, it sounds like you had a really tough day at work today. That can be reflective listening. Reflective listening is, this is what I hear you saying. Is that what you're saying? I'm asking because what you say is not always what I hear. And we need to check in and make sure that I'm not getting into mind reading, because that's a very common thing. We get into mind reading where you say something, you begin to say something, and my mind fills in the middle in the end, and I can tell you what you were thinking, why you were thinking it, what your intention was, and then one of us isn't needed in the conversation because then I know it all. And so reflective listening is really coming and saying, hey, is this what you're saying? Do you feel understood? So reflective listening is really important, and I think it's really also important that when we're communicating, we don't have to agree. You know, when I am saying something back to you, and especially if we've been in a disagreement and I'm saying something back to you, is this what you said? It doesn't mean that I'm agreeing with what you say. Most people simply want to be understood. And when I can feel understood, you know what? Now there's a feeling of safety.
The number 2 reason why couples go to see you, Kim, it's kind of ramping up at this point, conflict and arguments.
Yeah, this is a big one. So many people don't know how to have healthy conflict. And again, this can really tie back to our families of origin in what does conflict mean? Because if I grew up in a household and one of my parents, was very loud and they yelled, and as a little child, I'm intimidated by this, you know what? When I grow up, I'm probably going to be more of an avoider when it comes to conflict. I don't want conflict. And so I may people please. I may just say what you want, what I think you want to hear. Another person can be very confrontational, but not necessarily in a bad way. It's just if we're not agreeing or if we're frustrated, we need to talk about it because we need to get this out in the open. And both parties have the same goal. Neither one of them wants conflict.
Right. You've got an exploder and an imploder.
That's right.
In that case.
And so then what happens is the exploder becomes more of the pursuer, and they chase the person that's the imploder because they want to talk about it. And usually they want to talk about it right now, right here, because it's going to make me feel better to talk about it.
Correct.
And the imploder is going to really kind of maybe go inward. They may stonewall, ignore, withdraw, and neither one of those are healthy.
And what do you say in that case? What kind of tool do you give your couples when that's the case?
The biggest thing is when we are communicating, there's several tools that we work on. One is learning to speak from your perspective. And what I mean by that, let's say that you and I are married and you say something, you're raising your voice, and to me, I'm feeling like you're yelling at me. Okay, I can come back and I can tell you, you yelled at me and you hurt my feelings, but it comes across as an accusation and it comes across as an attack. And, normally that can put the other person on defense, and I'm not able to hear anything you're saying because you're defending yourself. No, I didn't yell at you. No, I wasn't mad. And so we really talk about how do you speak from your perspective that says, you know what, I felt yelled at. You can't argue with me and say, no, I didn't feel that way.
Can you paint a picture? I know you won't give names, but can you paint a picture of a couple that has come to see you for conflict resolution?
I think that when couples come to me for conflict resolution, and so many of the patterns are the same. Anytime somebody feels like I'm being accused of something, or I'm feeling like I'm in trouble, or I may get into a posture of defensiveness, and it's called flooding. Our brain goes into what's called fight, flight, freeze. And your brain does not know the difference between if you go outside and you see a bear, and God made our bodies where all of our kind of our logic, our executive functioning kind of closes down, and our brain begins to shoot adrenaline to our body, so we get ready to run to save our lives. Our heart rate goes up. Well, our body is made like that to protect us. The only problem is our brain doesn't know the difference when I'm feeling emotionally attacked and unsafe, or it's physically unsafe. And so what happens is our brain starts to shoot chemicals to our body, and you literally have a physical reaction. You've got cortisol, which is the stress hormone, and it's shooting out cortisol, and you've got adrenaline, hitting your system, and your heart rate's going up, and your fists are getting tight. And when that happens, we use the term your brain gets flooded. And when I'm working with couples, I will explain being flooded is almost like when you've got a lawnmower in the garage and you're pulling the crank and you're choking, the engine, you're giving it gas and pulling the crank, but it's not starting. If you keep pulling the crank and you don't let up, you're going to flood the engine. And the only way, do you know how you get the engine to unflood?
You leave it alone.
You leave it alone. You walk away, you come back 20, 25, 30 minutes later, and you're going to do everything. You may do it all the same. You pull the crank, give it some gas, and it revs right up.
So what I'm hearing you say, therapist Kim Har, is when somebody is in that flooded state, just one person,
Yep.
there might be two,
Yep.
leave it alone for now.
Stop. Yes, it is walk away. Now, it's different than just walking away and saying, I'm not talking about this. That's called stonewalling. If I just refuse to say, I'm not talking about this, I'm done, and I turn my back and I walk away, that's unhealthy. Because now I'm abandoning the other person. I'm abandoning the relationship. And the healthy way to do that is to agree ahead of time, not in the midst of conflict, but agree when we're having hard conversations. We're going to agree that either one of us can call a timeout. And if we call a timeout,
That needs to be respected.
it needs to be respected. We're not going to, try and get one last thing in. And it's not used as a weapon. It's not like I'm going to say everything I want to say. And then when you start to talk, I say, I need a timeout. Yeah, we're not going to do that. It is more either one of us can call it. And whoever says, hey, I need a timeout, I actually encourage the words, I'd like to press pause on me right now. Because I'm beginning to feel defensive.
Good idea.
I'm beginning to feel this way, and I want to be able to really hear what you're saying. I want to be able to communicate what I need to communicate, and right now, this isn't going the right direction.
But I need to press pause on me.
That's right. Because even that, if I'm saying I need to press pause on you right now, those are kind of loaded words.
It's not going to go well.
And so when you do call a timeout, what you want to do is whoever calls the timeout needs to, at that exact moment, say, but this is when let's get back together. So it may be, let's take a timeout. Let's take 20, 30 minutes. Let's go, you go do your thing. I'm going to go do my thing in the house. And let's go get something to drink, come back to the kitchen table, and let's talk about it again.
So do couples see you for conflict resolution because they don't know about that specific tool you just gave, or...
I think, and
Why?
let me just say, you use the word conflict resolution, but really it's learning how to manage conflict.
Okay.
Because when we are in conflict, typically the issues we're arguing about, the surface issues, aren't what we're really arguing about. We're arguing about those underlying feelings of, it may be I feel unimportant or unloved or disrespected, or, you hit a button and I felt controlled. And so it's usually a deeper issue that's going on. And those are, I call them kind of our hot buttons. Those are going to get pushed throughout. When you live with somebody, we know how to push each other's buttons, and we need to learn how to manage.
So you as a professional in that case will do a deep dive into what's really behind this.
That's right.
This conflict, which very likely is not the real reason those two are
That's
sitting
right.
there
That's
in front
right.
of you.
Well, if you don't do that, if you're just talking about this surface issue, then you're going to, see couples with a crisis of the week. We want to be able to teach them, how do you go in and say, okay, why did that bother me? What just happened? And then when I can share with you, and I'm not having to defend my feelings, if I'm able to come in and say, this is how I was feeling, and then I like to encourage couples to use what's called a softened startup. And a softened startup is, before I share something, I give you the benefit of the doubt. So let's say I felt yelled at or you hurt my feelings. Mm-hmm. A softened startup is going to sound like, I might say, you know what, David, I don't know that this was your intention or not. It may not have been your intention, but I just want you to know that when I heard the words, and I'm going to put those words in, my feelings were hurt. Okay, that doesn't feel attacking. Versus if I say, you always do that. You never listen. You did that on purpose. You said this.
I was going to point out that you didn't say when you said.
Right.
You said when I heard.
That's right. These are the words I heard. Because the more we can tie it to our perspective. Because when couples come to see me, it is so easy to get into, one of them will say, well, you said this. And the other person will come back. And if I let that go on, it could be a 5-minute argument about what were the exact words I said. What was the exact time I said it?
Yeah.
And we get so distracted by the details that it's being able to really go into, what's really going on beneath the surface.
Correct. And you only have 50 minutes in a typical therapy session.
And that goes by really, really fast.
Yeah.
That goes by really, really fast. And you want to give each partner a chance to share what they're feeling. And so when I'm working with couples, it's very much when someone is sharing from their perspective, a lot of times I have to coach and guide them because I'll hear them going into words that sound very accusing, and I'll watch the other partner and I can see in their bodies when there's a reaction. And so often I will pause and I'll just say, hey, let's just pause for a second. And I'm going to ask the partner, what just happened right there in your body? What just happened? What did you just hear?
Okay, so you're giving us great tools. So if I am in a couple and I will use these tools in the case of a conflict, let's say in the home, and so then let's say it is taken care of in the moment, would you say it's time to go see a therapist when it continues to happen over and over and over?
Sure. When you've got a pattern of something and there's a difference between, a disagreement or just kind of like a small irritation that when you've got two people living in a home, I don't care how many years you've been married, there's going to be things that we just that bug us about our partners. But when that begins to be something that I'm thinking about a lot, when it's something that I'm holding a grudge, that I'm bringing up, that I'm pointing out, you don't want to wait until things are so, I'll say, at a crisis point in your relationship. It's so much easier to come in and say, you know what, here's something we're struggling with. We just need some help in this area.
Today is Therapy Day on the Road Show. I'm David Warren, your host, and our very special guest / in-house therapist is Kim Har, and her website is there'shopehere.com. And today we're talking about the 10 top reasons couples go to see Kim for counseling. When we come back, Kim will talk about and share tools regarding these couples issues: trust and commitment. That would include infidelity, emotional versus physical intimacy, and finances. We'll both be back after this.
I'm Karen Jensen Salisbury, one of the hosts you hear on the Oasis Network Roadshow. For 35 years, this 1 hour of the day has inspired and motivated you, our listeners, with thousands of stories of people whose lives demonstrate the truth that with God, all things are possible. It's an hour that you should make a part of your day, Monday through Friday, starting at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Central. The Roadshow, an Oasis Network presentation.
On today's program, we are hearing the top 10 reasons couples go see our friend Kim Har for counseling help. And again, the name of her practice is There's Hope Counseling, and her website address is there'shopehere.com. And this is very common, folks. If you hear about a really good therapist, I'm going to say most of the time, they don't have any slots available, or a lot of times. Now, you're looking at me, but I kind of know this to be true. The really good ones are full for a reason. But there are others that could take couples on. Where do people find this kind of help?
Sure. A lot of times you can reach out to, I would say, focusonthefamily.org. There's a website. They've got recommendations of good Christian counselors that they recommend, and they've put through a vetted process. You can go to aacc.net, which is the American Association of Christian Counselors. You can also, I always encourage people, ask if you've got some close friends that you know have gone to a therapist, ask them for a recommendation or a referral. Ask your pastor, who does the church recommend? Because they've probably used somebody before. People will sometimes call me, and I tell you, I have to really be careful I don't take on too much because I want to help everybody. But I have gotten to where I will say, you know what, if somebody calls me and they say we're looking for a marriage counselor or a counselor for this, I try to have a referral list available of people that I trust. And I will say, you know what, I can't take anybody, but let me give you a couple phone numbers, and I will send them to people that I also trust.
All right. Do we dare mention this about pastors? Should pastors know what is in their wheelhouse regarding couples counseling and therapy?
Yes. There are many pastors that are actually licensed therapists as well. I do know those. Pastors receive a certain amount of training in counseling.
Some pastors do, not all.
But it's really important to know when you're going to see someone, and if you're going to go talk to a pastor, it's important to know how much training do they have in that and what is their experience, because they may have the best intentions, but a lot of times pastors don't have the time and energy to be putting in. Sometimes, I may see a couple for 6 months. And depending on what level their marriage is at.
Yeah.
And a lot of times the pastors or pastoral staff don't have the time. They don't have the expertise in specific areas. And so when you've got someone, like for my licenses, I have to get 20 hours of continuing education every single year where I'm continuing doing my trainings and I'm continuing having to pay for my licenses. And so you want to make sure you're going somewhere where there's some expertise.
What kind of specific training do you receive, or did you receive, actually do receive because of the continuing ed, for the area of marriage and family counseling specifically?
Well, I have got 2 different licenses. I'm a licensed professional counselor. And for that license, it was a 60-hour master's program after my bachelor's. But then I also had to receive 3,000 hours of, practice with clients where I had to sit under another licensed therapist that they would approve my work. And so that was about a 2.5-year process. I also I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. And that was a little bit, now this is 17 years ago. It was a 48 hours master's at that time. I think now it actually is up to 60 hours. But it was more specific training in working with dyads, with 2 people, with 3 people. It was a little bit more in-depth in, marriage and family systems. Licensed professional counselor does get that. It's just not at that same intensity in that same area of focus.
And really, that training is what you're sharing with us today, the tools that you learned in that training.
I'm sharing tools, I'm sharing tools I've had to learn over the years in my schooling, in my practice. So yes, I'm an open book today.
I love me a good story, Kim. So at the beginning, when you would have a couple in crisis see you, I'm sure you had to kind of keep a no, don't smile, don't laugh, don't frown, don't look surprised. I'm sure you were shell-shocked a little bit at the front end, weren't you?
I have learned, have you ever heard people say when you go to the doctor, and the doctor has to give you a shot and you've got to take your clothes off, they'll say, you know what, they've seen one, they've seen them all, it doesn't matter.
No big deal.
It's a little bit like that in therapy. I don't think there's anything I haven't heard. And so, I've had to learn, sometimes you have to have a poker face. You make sure, because the last thing you want to do when somebody is opening up, and a lot of times these are some of the most vulnerable places of their life, they are being hypervigilant and they're scanning your face for judgment. And so it's really important that not only do you really believe this, but you make sure that your clients come in and they're not feeling judged by you. That's a sign of a good therapist.
As we continue with our top 10 reasons that couples see you for marriage counseling, I want to give a warning for anybody listening with a small child. I don't know how deep this will go, but just know we're going to talk about a couple of sensitive topics here, and here we go. The number 3 reason why a couple would see you is trust and commitment issues, and that would include infidelity. Take it, Kim.
That's right. Trust and commitment issues, when these issues hit a marriage, these are usually more what I call crisis topics, crisis marriages. Couples will come to therapy for 3 main reasons. One, premarital, which is a little bit like, it's kind of like you're test driving a car. You're learning, you're excited. They come in for maintenance, which is a little bit like an oil change in a car. And then they come in for crisis, which is like we're getting towed and we've had an accident. And so these crisis topics are things like betrayal and infidelity. And the infidelity part, we're talking about affairs. And a lot of times, couples don't agree on what an affair is. And we will separate that into, there's an actual physical affair, there is an emotional affair, and a lot of times people will say, like for instance, pornography is one of the big things that can really derail a marriage. And one partner can feel so betrayed when they discover another partner's, what they've been looking at or what they've been viewing, or it's become so easy in this, computer age. We can get on chat rooms. We can have secret messages. We can go on websites. And lots of times it's not uncommon for me to hear, yeah, but I wasn't unfaithful because I didn't have a physical affair. And so there's a part of really helping couples to see, okay, what is the physical affair and the emotional affair? And honestly, sometimes the emotional affair can be just as destructive, if not more.
Mm-hmm. Because trust is broken at that point.
Trust is broken. You were hiding something. You were, especially like in pornography, you're looking at something which comes back to hit my self-esteem that says, why wasn't I enough? Why are you looking there? And so then I begin to have feelings of abandonment and rejection and trust issues mount.
And am I ever going to be enough for you?
That's correct. And then what can happen is the partner who's been betrayed, there's lots of feelings of grief and anger, and then they can turn into the police. And now I'm watching your every move, and I am checking everything you're doing. And the partner that, did the betraying can feel controlled. And so in issues of infidelity and betrayal, those are probably some of the most serious issues that come into my practice. And we've got to get on the same page of, first of all, what is that betrayal? And if one partner feels betrayed, it's a betrayal. If something that you may think, whatever you did wasn't that big of a deal, you may be flirting with, it may just be, hey, I was just being innocent flirting with somebody. And if the other person feels, that felt like a betrayal to me, it's hard for me to really feel secure in our relationship, then that's a betrayal.
Does a lot of this surface when somebody peeks at the other partner's phone?
Yes. And that's a part of the problem, again, with the digital age. We've got all these social media things, and everybody's got passwords. And so what happens is I will have couples that come in and they don't share passwords with each other. It's kind of like, this is my private, you got on my phone and that was my phone and you invaded my privacy. And you need to trust me. And then they get gaslighted. Then they convince the other partner they're crazy for checking. You should have trusted me. But so the secrecy is a big part to feeling betrayed. Like, how can I trust you? And in addition to the betrayal and infidelity, because I want to say, affairs are very hard to heal, but it is possible to heal from an affair. If you've got two partners that are both willing to roll up their sleeves and do the work, and it usually takes some time in rebuilding that trust, but it is possible as long as you've got new healthy behaviors and you're willing to work the process.
What advice would you have regarding cell phones and knowing the other person's passcode and willingness to show him or her their history?
I tell couples that come to see me, I encourage them that there are no passwords the other person doesn't know. In marriage, there's a me and a me, but there's also a we.
I guess what popped in my head just then is, why are we doing this if we're hiding things?
Right. If I need privacy, and if I'm setting a password, I'm telling you, keep out. And so if I'm telling you, keep out, how does that build trust? I don't know what I don't have access to. It also really makes you that much more vulnerable to slide into behaviors that you would have never slid into before. So, being able to have transparency, being able to have we share passwords on phones and computers, and there's not secrets. And when you are healing betrayals and infidelities and lack of trust, it's got to be a radical honesty policy. There's nothing that you can't ask me that I won't answer. And now, how you ask me is important, because if I ask you something and I'm accusing you, then we're going to go right back into that loop where I accuse you, you withdraw or you yell or come back at me. And so we're getting into those unhealthy patterns. Betrayals aren't just about infidelity, though. Betrayals can be things like addictions. If I've got, an alcohol addiction or a drug addiction or a gambling, maybe I'm spending money that you don't know about that I'm spending. I'm going into our bank accounts and I'm spending our money. You know what? That's betrayal. Any addiction affects the family. People will say, hey, if I'm drinking or if I'm doing this, it's only affecting me. If I'm, whatever it is, it's only affecting me. And addiction affects the whole family. And it's important, I would say, if there is addiction issues, getting into, recovery programs, especially as a family if you need to. And then the other thing with the, just in rebuilding trust, a lot of times crisis is people will throw the word divorce around like a weapon. And the more we speak, well, fine, let's just get divorced. Every time we speak that into the atmosphere, we are giving life to that. And we're creating insecurity in our partners. We're creating a plan B in the back of our mind. We're not rolling up our sleeves to work on this. And that's one of the things when couples come to work with me, I will ask them, especially if they're in a crisis period, I will ask them to take divorce off the table for 6 months. Because it's got to be a safe place where both partners can come and be vulnerable and not be afraid whatever we talk about is going to be used against me. Or, you're asking me to become vulnerable to you, but then you're going to leave. So I ask for them to make a commitment to each other that we are rolling up our sleeves and we are both committed to this process, even if they have to reevaluate in 6 months.
And the tool I heard you give just a few moments ago is there needs to be 100% transparency.
That's right.
Among couples.
That's right. If there's been secrets, couples cannot keep secrets from each other. And the keeping secrets from each other, if one partner has to dig and find, and so when I find something you've been hiding, if you come clean on that and you say, yeah, I'm sorry, and I want to work on that, and I tell you that there's nothing else I'm hiding. If there's something else that gets discovered, I am setting that process back, and I am ruining chances of trust being built in my marriage. So it's better to come clean in the beginning and say, you know what? No matter how painful this is to me, no matter how painful this is to our marriage, we've got to get things out in the open so that we can, it's almost like we clean out the infection so that now we can begin the healing. Because if we're not cleaning out and going down to the root of the infection, all we're doing is we're tormenting each other and we're keeping ourselves in that cycle.
I'm David Warren talking with our therapist, Kim Har. Again, she's a licensed professional counselor and a licensed marriage and family therapist, and she knows what she's talking about. Her website address, there'shopehere.com, and I know that clock's a ticking. I'm looking over at our sound man. Let's see how far we can get. Top 10, ha-ha, or hardy ha in your case, right?
That's right.
We're to number 4. I want to give another warning to those listening with kids in the car or at home or wherever. And this number 4 reason why couples go to see you, Kim, is emotional intimacy versus physical intimacy. And what immediately comes to mind is, and this is kind of stereotyping, so I don't know that that's fair on my part, where the man wants sex and the woman wants intimacy, and each other's needs aren't really being fulfilled.
That's correct. What I find is that both when the couple comes in, I give them different assessments, and the common complaint is they're both lonely. They're both lonely. They don't feel loved. With women, it is more, I feel unloved. I feel unimportant. I don't feel treasured. I don't feel special. And so they're talking about an emotional intimacy that says, you love me for me, not for what I can give you. You love me. I'm your girlfriend. You want to be around me. And when a woman feels special and nurtured and loved, it's a natural overflow to want to also meet the man's desire of sexual touch. In a woman, I hear many times women say, because I'll ask about physical touch that is not sexual touch. Because even non-sexual touch there's such a need for touch in marriages.
Holding hands,
rubbing a back, just snuggling up to each other, cuddling. And women will say, I can't do that because it always has to lead to sex. So I don't want to do those things because it feels like there's strings attached. So most of the time, it is a woman's love language is typically, not all the time, but it typically tends to be, give me some quality time and acts of service. Show me you love me. Do things with me. Whereas the chief complaint from men is, I hear two things. One is, I'm not getting any sex or not enough sex. And then they'll also hear, I'm just here because I'm a paycheck. So I don't feel needed, loved either. But with the wanting sex, you can't have where we're having sexual touch without the emotional intimacy. Because if we expect that, and this is one of those really tender things, because we don't want to do this standoff where I'll only meet your needs if you might meet my needs. And I see that very often. Well, they're not doing this for me, so why would I want to do this for them? But when it comes to sexual touch, if a man is one, or it could be reversed, it could be a woman saying, hey, I'm not getting sexual touch. But if we're getting sexual touch without that emotional intimacy, it is more of a woman can feel used. You're just using my body and I'm showing up to make you feel good, but this has nothing to do about me. And that can actually be traumatizing.
We're running short on time. Give us some tools in this area. What do you suggest?
I think the biggest thing is to learn your spouse's love language and speak it. Be able to know what makes my partner feel loved and cherished. How do I go out of my way to make sure that they know by words and actions that I love them? But don't wait for your partner to start meeting yours before you start making an attempt to show love, because that's where couples get stuck, is in this standoff. And just realize too that your partner's needs are different than yours, but they're just as important.
All right, before we say goodbye for today, Kim, let's go over again where people can find a good counselor, a good therapist. You gave us some websites earlier.
Sure. I suggest people go to the websites of focusonthefamily.org as well as aacc.net, which is the American Association of Christian Counselors. Ask for a referral from friends, ask for a referral from your pastors, and be willing to call someone, even if they're filled. Ask a therapist who they would refer.
Okay, get your notes out if you would, because we'll pick them up for part 2 next time we're together, and read us what the other 6 reasons why people come to see you for help, people being couples. And while you do that, I want to give your website address, there'shopehere.com.
All right, the next topics we're going to be talking about next time are the area of finances, the area of a mismatch in parenting styles and blending families, having extended family, the in-law problems, no longer feeling like they're in love, so I feel numb and I just don't like this person anymore, life transitions, and then last but not least, people come because this is my last-ditch effort. I want to say I went to counseling, but I'm already checked out.
Well, here's the good news. As we end today's program, there's hope, there's help, and there is healing. Kim, some final thoughts from you.
All right, some final thoughts for me is it's important to recognize that with counseling, it is actually not a sign of weakness to ask for counseling. It's a sign of strength. And when your partner asks you to go to counseling, go. Because if something's an issue to them, you need to make it an issue to you. So those are my closing thoughts today.
I think this is the favorite show we've ever done on therapy. Thank you, Kim Har.
Oh, I love it, David. Thank you for
we
having
love
me.
You. Well, for Kim Har, I'm David Warren, and it's been another great road show. You've been listening to The Road Show. If you'd like to write to us, here's our address. The Road Show, P.O. Box 1924, Tulsa, Oklahoma, 74101. Our email address is roadshow@oasisnetwork.org. The views of today's guest aren't necessarily those of this station, but we do appreciate and thank our guest for spending this time with us. The Road Show, an Oasis Network presentation.